I'm sorry. Okay? I'm sorry. 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 I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, okay?
Hey everybody, this is I'm Sorry, Okay? A podcast where we are watching so much Degrassi. I'm Mary here with Paul and LD. This week we watched Season 1, Episode 6 of Degrassi Junior High, Rumor Has It. This episode was written by Jan Moore, directed by Kit Hood, and originally aired on February 22nd, 1987. In this episode, when Caitlin hears rumors that her favorite teacher is gay, she begins to question her own sexuality. And actually, due to its theme of homosexuality, this episode was banned by the BBC in the UK.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow. I can't believe I didn't figure that out.
I just briefly saw that. I did not look further into it, but seemed worthy of inclusion. And while we're on the topic, content warning for this episode, we will be discussing homophobia and bullying.
Very rampant homophobia.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Although, I will say, well, okay, they maybe use like one slur, but a lot of the homophobia is just literally like calling someone a homosexual or a lesbian or gay. So it feels like, yeah, it's very like...
They were not going to use the F word
Oh.
No.
on Degrassi. You know what I mean? That was not going to happen. I did look up, I tried to figure out why maybe it was so controversial that a teacher would be gay in 1987. Like I tried to figure out if Canada was similar to the US in terms of like the AIDS crisis. Was there just kind of a worldwide homophobia? Because I tend to think of, and I think most Americans tend to think of Canada as being more progressive than us.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't really find a whole lot about specifically that time in 1987 and why it would be, you know, such a topic of discussion. But I will say that Canada was the first country outside of Europe to legalize gay marriage.
Hey.
Oh.
And also, I think they led the charge with same-sex adoption as well.
People do not want gay people to adopt for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, Caitlin Ryan's going to fix it.
Yeah.
She fixed it. Yeah, she's on it.
I also, before we start, I have my own I'm sorry, okay? Because in this episode, I found out that Susie is actually a Susie with an S, not with a Z. However, I went back to the first episode, and when she first like introduces herself to Stephanie, she's wearing a name tag that says S-U-Z-I-E. But in the credits for that episode and all of the other episodes, she's S-U-S-I-E.
Interesting. I would like more information about that.
I'm sure we all would.
I'm really serious.
Yeah, did the
I
prop
wanna know,
department
yeah.
just like have their own opinions on how to spell her name, or like I don't know what the disconnect was, but one of my sisters is a Susie, so I always pay attention to the spelling, which is why I noted it in the first episode at all. But yes, apparently they were wrong, which then made me wrong, and now I'm terribly sorry, okay?
I absolutely love that you just called that your I'm sorry, okay? I think anytime we make a mistake, we should acknowledge it with an I'm sorry, okay?
Yeah, so this is the first I'm sorry, okay, but it's more of an I'm sorry on behalf of Degrassi for misleading us all. All right, so we start this episode inside Caitlin's brain while she's having a dream. In her dream, she's in Miss Avery's class, and I think Miss Avery's just kind of talking about like some historical babes, and you know, Caitlin leans over to Susie, and she's kind of telling her what a great teacher she is and how she makes everything interesting. And then Miss Avery calls her over, and they sort of side hug at her desk while Miss Avery compliments an essay that Caitlin wrote and tells her that she's the best student she's ever had. And then all the other kids in class start whispering about Miss Avery being gay.
Well, I'll say I like the way the dream sequence is shot. It's definitely different from the way they would normally shoot this show. We get some like weird zooms. The back of the classroom, there's a lot of pink, which I feel like is intentional.
It's real enough too.
Yeah.
Like the things that are shown in this dream are happening in real life almost exactly,
Yeah.
which we see later at school.
Right, like all of the interactions we see like kind of repeated in the actual classroom setting, right?
Yeah.
There's nothing like fantastical or anything like about this dream. It's a pretty realistic dream.
Yeah.
Right.
I also got to say, right away at 58 seconds, there is a very quick shot of a student in the classroom doing the like pointing and saying she's gay. The student is wearing my outfit of the week. They're wearing a very light blue sweater. I'm not sure what color specifically.
Like a turquoise, maybe?
Yeah.
I would have said baby blue.
Yeah, a good baby blue turquoise, big sweater with a white button up underneath it. I would wear this outfit. So you can check that outfit at, OKAY.
So outside of school the next day, Caitlin and Susie are talking about the sleepover that Caitlin is going to have while her parents are out of town. They see Rick. Caitlin says hi. There's some giggling. As we recall from previous episodes, Caitlin kind of has a crush on Rick. Well, as we recall, and maybe we want to forget from the episode where they're trying to make Rick smile and failing horribly. They're not funny. They seem like they have other skills, but they're not funny.
They do have other skills. They're in 7th grade using a dark room unsupervised.
Stick to that.
They're doing well.
I was going to say leave the comedy to Joey Jeremiah, but maybe not.
No.
Yeah, no. Definitely
Just
not.
leave the comedy out altogether.
Period.
So Kathleen and Annie are sitting on the steps gossiping about Miss Avery possibly being gay. And I think, is Annie the original beret girl?
She is. So I went back to episode 1 and then put them in 2 different tabs so I could toggle between them and make sure, because I am tragically somewhat face blind. And so I don't always remember faces. So I had to check. But yes, I wrote in my notes, is that beret girl? Yes, it is. And then in a scene later where they say her name, I'm like, beret girl now has a name.
Yes. So Beret Girl is back with a series of berets. Unfortunately, I thought that I liked Beret Girl, but after this episode, I think I do not, but we'll get there.
But yeah, Kathleen, my impression is Kathleen is the one that's making up these rumors about Miss Avery, right? Like,
Yeah,
it doesn't,
she's the instigator for sure.
like, she is patient zero. She's just sitting around bored and like making shit up.
She is just watching Miss Avery as she arrives to school every day, spying on her and seeing that, she's being driven to school by a woman.
By
and so
someone.
has decided she is gay. And it's like,
She-
haven't you heard the rumors that I made up and am
that
now
I'm
circulating?
making up right now?
Haven't you heard my rumors? Well, it is interesting that Caitlin has the dream before Kathleen sort of starts this like rumor about Miss Avery.
It's
But I guess
probably
we
been
don't
going
know.
around for a
Yeah,
little while.
The rumor may and I guess it's just, we kind of find out Miss Avery's not married. So I guess this could just kind of be a general like rumor that kind of spreads every year about her.
I mean, Kathleen says, I don't know. I've never seen her with any men. And I'm just like, where are you seeing your teachers? Like, because they're not living in a small town. They're not even living in a suburb. They're in a major city. Contrary to what Lucy has to say about Toronto being a hick town, it is actually a large city. How often are they actually running into their teachers outside of school and also noticing their partners or their families? It's just a bit much. Kathleen must be so bored.
Right. And like, why would you care? I don't remember ever caring about my teachers' personal lives, unless maybe you thought a teacher was hot and you were curious if they like were married or something. but just like generally being curious or suspicious of your teachers' home lives, like I did not think about my teachers outside of school.
I had one teacher that I ran into outside of school at the grocery store a lot, and there were a lot of rumors that he had been recently stood up at the altar.
Oh.
Yeah, and it was really, really sad, and everyone thought that that was really funny, and I didn't really think it was funny because I really liked him, and he was my challenge English teacher, and so he was always giving me really great books to read and really encouraging me. I thought he was really cool. He loved like a tweed jacket and a sweater vest. I don't know. He had a real kind of like Dead Poet Society vibe. I was really into it. People circulated a lot of rumors about him, but I never understood why anyone was super interested in that information.
No.
So Caitlin and Susie are in the dark room working on a photo project for Miss Avery's class. And Caitlin tells Susie that she's been having weird dreams, and Susie is here for it. She wants to hear all about them as long as they're not too dirty.
She says that they're significant and they reveal our desires. And I was just like, what 12-year-old is talking like this?
I don't know, but I kind of love Susie in this moment because I'm like, yes.
Oh,
let's
I'd absolutely be
realize some
asking.
dreams. I do remember there was this dude that I went to high school with who was like really good at dream analysis. And I remember like sitting on the bus with him once and like, I don't know, telling him some dream, and he just like kind of went off and did this whole like analysis, and it was cool. I thought it was cool.
So you think Susie is ready to dabble in dream analysis, maybe?
In dream analysis, maybe some astrology, maybe a little bit of tarot.
Oh, I absolutely think that in 2020, as an adult, Susie's got a tarot deck
Yes, absolutely.
in her like local bookshop tote bag.
Local, yeah, that she got from like a feminist bookshop.
Yeah.
I see great things in her future. So Caitlin, like, even though these two are best friends, Caitlin is very much like, no, not ready to like share this with anyone else. So she's already kind of having like kind of weird feelings about this dream, enough to mention it, but not enough to like go into detail about it. So back in Miss Avery's class, they're wrapping up, and as the students are leaving, Miss Avery is touching every single student on the shoulder, which does seem a bit excessive.
I put multiple times in my notes for this episode that whether or not she's gay, she's still really inappropriately touching students, but I felt like that her touching was supposed to imply to us that she is gay. I felt like there's always been this really problematic correlation between homosexuality and pedophilia, and I felt like the show was not really doing anything to dispel that myth.
You think that was like deliberately in there?
Oh, like if she's gay, she's also grooming students.
Yeah, I just felt like, well, because they kind of imply it a little bit later. I'm not super into what this implies, and I think that it absolutely is implying this.
Yeah.
And like, I just kind of took her actions as she's a warm person and she's just trying to be sort of like maternal and like comforting. However, it's just some people aren't comfortable with that, and you really shouldn't be putting students in a position where, you know, they have to speak out against you like touching them if they don't want to be touched. It's just not a good position to like put students in. But I could see how somebody, I think from her perspective, she's just trying to be warm and comforting, you know. And as we've seen from the other adults, like they're not at all engaged with their students, so she's kind of taking it to another extreme and maybe being overly friendly.
It's like, not to get political, but I think it's like what Joe Biden thinks he's doing.
You think she's about 2 seconds from smelling a little girl's hair?
Who's to say?
Yeah, it's this sort of misguided, like, you know, well, maybe if I just make this physical connection, we'll have this intimate like moment that we wouldn't have otherwise. But it's just like, you just don't know how other people feel about it. And while some kids might need like a hug or something, other kids, you know, might really be uncomfortable with like being touched.
I would not want a hug from my teacher,
No.
No.
right? Like, no.
I
Yeah.
mean, and I guess all I mean is like, you know, there might be a kid like Rick who have like no sort of like comfort or anything like that in their lives. And so, I mean, you shouldn't get it from a teacher anyway, but like, I guess that's sort of like, I don't know. I'm like, Miss Avery, what are you doing? I'm trying too hard to understand what she's doing here.
But I guess in our last episode, we discussed that Radich is really kind of not attending to the pastoral role of a teacher. And in this, we're seeing that Miss Avery is almost overdoing it.
Radich is like typical like dad that doesn't give you enough positive like attention, and Miss Avery's like trying to make up for it by like being overly like motherly. Okay, so kind of in the back of the class, Caitlin and Susie are talking about the sleepover with Kathleen and Annie. They're all down for popcorn, and Annie wants to talk about boys because what else is there but boys and berets?
Can I just say, number one, when Annie says that she wants to talk about boys, Kathleen calls her a pervert.
Oh, wow, it's gonna be so much fun. We can eat popcorn and talk about boys all night. Annie, you're such a pervert.
Which is
Yeah.
wild. And second of all, and what I wrote down was a stunning writing decision. Annie says, it's perfectly normal to think about boys. What else is there to think about? And Miss Avery immediately goes, oh, girls. And so it was kind of a call and response.
Like Miss Avery doesn't know that that's what they're talking about,
Right.
but the writers planted that. Love
Absolutely.
it.
Right.
Yeah.
Did not catch that.
It was pretty subtle. So
Wonderful.
And like we don't know if Kathleen is religious, but it is this vibe of like, okay, so it's she thinks it's like wrong to be gay, but it's also perverted to be straight or to be interested in boys. So you know, Kathleen just wants like there to be no sexuality like whatsoever, except the sexuality that we use to judge others, like except as a form of oppression.
in 2020, I feel like Kathleen would be exploring her asexuality. But I think in 1987, she's just a weenie. She's a bigot, and she's a weenie.
Yeah.
She's pretty terrible. So later in the hallway, Miss Avery is talking to Radich, and Kathleen is still gossiping about her. She's obsessed. Kathleen is sort of the Yick and Arthur in this episode in terms of like, well, we'll get to Yick and Arthur in a minute because they're also being Yick and Arthur in this episode. But she's just kind of like obsessively like watching this person and like commenting on them in a way that's like really weird.
Well, obsessive and judgmental too.
Yeah.
And Melanie is not here for it. She's just like, what's wrong with being a homosexual? And, you know, she's just kind of generally standing up for Miss Avery and like, why would it matter anyway? And so then they start calling her names too and accusing her of being gay too.
What's wrong with being homosexual anyway? Why? Are you a Lizzie too? No, but I'm not prejudiced either.
Like, she doesn't take the bait. She doesn't fight. She's not like, I am not. You know what I mean? She's just kind of like, listen, I'm not a bigot.
Mm-hmm.
It is true because, you know, as we see like later with Caitlin, I mean, Kathleen is definitely bullying in this episode, and you see like she doesn't get much of a reaction from Melanie and she kind of moves on. But Caitlin is like more upset, and then she just kind of goes harder after Caitlin. And it's kind of like, that's that, like, you know, the bad advice of like, oh, just ignore it. But in some ways, it is like, if you don't give someone that much of a reaction, sometimes they will just kind of like leave you alone. And so like Kathleen knows she's not going to get anything out of Melanie. So she just like kind of drops it a little bit. But also, why is everyone always coming from Melanie?
Right? Melanie's just minding her business, being a nice friend.
Yeah. Defending her teacher, who seems like a great teacher.
Yeah, multiple times in this episode, people refer to her as a great teacher.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so now we have Arthur and Yick. So they're at Yick's locker, and Yick is looking for some money that his dad gave him to buy sneakers, and his locker is predictably trashed.
It is stressing me out.
Pretty bad.
Yeah. I think they pretty quickly decide that it was stolen.
Yeah, Yick pretty immediately is like, I can't find it, therefore it has been stolen.
Right. As if anyone else could have found money in that locker.
Or anything.
Anything at all.
These two suck.
There could have been an 8-inch dildo in that locker and you would not be able to find it.
Now, it's after school and we're at the Slumby. And the girls are prank calling their teachers and laughing way too hard at it. These prank calls are terrible.
They're about as good as their previous jokes.
Come on,
Yeah.
pranking Raditch. You don't even have to do anything. Just the act itself is incredible on its own.
Yeah, so it seems like I don't remember if it's like an actual hat that they're passing around or a bowl or what, but they've just like written down the names of all their teachers and then they're taking turns.
Which I thought was hilarious because there's only 2 teachers.
Yeah, they call the only 2 teachers at the school. So why did they even bother writing their names? Maybe they just wrote their names down a bunch of times. So Kathleen says she knows Raditch is not married because he doesn't wear a ring and she is straight up nosy. And then Caitlin pulls out Miss Avery's name. And when she calls, another woman answers the phone. And then Kathleen just like starts in again on her lesbian theory.
God, honestly, it's a difficult watch because it's just like, it's such a conclusion to jump to. It's like she's never heard of a roommate. She's never heard of a sister. She's never heard of a friend. Like I have had people answer my phone for me before if I'm like in the bathroom or something. You know what I mean? And Kathleen's just like, oh, I bet it's her lover. And she's like, oh my God, Kathleen, shut up.
It seems like it's clearly like a weekend night or something because they're having this sleepover. So Miss Avery could easily just have a friend over. There could be a million explanations.
Kathleen is just so boring. Like she has absolutely nothing to talk about. So this just keeps coming up.
Oh, and I think she kind of starts like saying like why she thinks like Miss Avery is gay, and then she says that she like saw her and her friend on like King Street and they were holding hands. And then she and Annie just start like just getting like super goofy about like what they were doing together. And Caitlin and Susie are like pretty quiet in this moment.
Like people are affectionate with their friends. People hold hands with people who aren't their partners.
Well, and it seems like Kathleen is clearly embellishing and just like she's doing it to like get a reaction. In this case, out of Annie, who's like kind of like going along with it, and they're just being stupid.
I mean, Annie is thrilled to have this intel, even if it's not real.
I feel like Annie just is here for the gossip of any kind.
Well, yeah, that beret is filled with secrets.
So outside of school the next day, Miss Avery's friend drops her off and they kiss each other's cheeks before she gets out of the car. As we see her friend, I'm going to just say I think this is the outfit of the week. Her friend has some killer shades on. She's got these big old earrings. She's wearing a scarf, like a yellow sweater. It's just like a really good look for dropping your friend off at work.
It's a very, very strong look.
Yes.
Absolutely nails it. Love her short haircut, which I think also no one says anything about it, but I think that also feeds the rumor mill of, like, oh, Miss Avery's lover has short hair.
And so many accessories. She must be gay. So Kathleen and Annie see them and they continue gossiping by a tree. So inside of school, Arthur and Yick start investigating who stole Yick's money. And at the same time, so they're kind of in the hallway, Rick is walking around and he's saying he won $100 in the lottery, so he's rich now, and he bought a bunch of licorice that he's sharing with everyone.
Okay, so I have 2 things to say about this. Number 1, 100 Canadian dollars in 1987 is now worth 204 Canadian dollars and 49 cents.
Damn.
Number
much
two.
licorice.
Number two, can we talk about the fact that Rick, who is like a working class kid, he lives with his brother, he is redistributing that wealth, baby. Like,
Yeah.
he wins $100. I think he buys himself like a shirt. He looks like he's wearing a new shirt. He could spend that money in any number of ways on any number of things as like a 13 or 14-year-old, but he buys a giant bag of licorice and offers it to everyone at school, whether they are friends with him or not. And that is dope. Comrade Rick.
$100 when you're in middle school is like an unfathomable amount of money.
Right? I found $20 at the mall once when I was a freshman in high school, and I legitimately spent it immediately at Gadzooks. Yeah. And that just seemed like an absolute shitload of money. So $100 is like a metric shitload of money because they use the metric system in Canada. I don't know what the conversion of shitload is. I've derailed us a bit now. But I just think it's really important to note here that Rick, who is constantly being stereotyped as, you know, aggressive and mean, someone who steals, someone who shoplifts, someone who fights, but he has some good fortune befall him, and he is kindly sharing it with everyone that he sees.
Yeah, and even back when he was still living with his dad and he didn't have any money or anything, he still like tried to share, you know, he offered Joey a Coke, which he really suffered the consequences for from his dad. But he wants to, you know, yeah, you're right. Like as soon as he has something, this is a kid who doesn't really have much. As soon as he gets a little bit of something, he just wants to share it with everyone else. And I think, yeah, we're really seeing that like his reputation is very unearned. Like him seeming tough was a reaction to a really like bad situation in his home life. But yeah, as soon as he's able to, he's like trying to like just like make friends and like be kind to people, and like he's maybe doing it a little bit to like change the way that people see him,
or it's just who he is
yeah.
at heart anyway. I just think Rick is awesome.
Yes.
And I think it's important to note.
Yes, and his hair always looks great.
An immaculate wavy bowl cut.
Just the texture is just envious. So Kathleen is telling everyone about the kiss now. And then when they're in class, this bitch raises her hand and asks Miss Avery in front of everyone if she has a boyfriend. And Miss Avery says,
inappropriate.
So inappropriate. And Miss Avery says she has hundreds, but I don't know what business that is of yours.
Hundreds
Yes.
of boyfriends.
She said, sit down and shut up.
I do feel like that's a question that maybe like in elementary school a kid might ask their teacher, like, do you have a husband or a wife? But like in middle school, like
Kindergarten.
you should know better. Yeah.
Kindergarten tops.
Yes.
Honestly. And that's usually because in kindergarten you're like, I'm gonna marry my teacher.
Yeah. All right, so in the next scene, Arthur and Yick start stalking Rick. They're gossiping about him, and Arthur calls him a criminal.
Okay, I think this is really antithetical to Arthur's usual characterization. I think it's very strange that he has just decided that Rick is a criminal. I know that he had that sort of, his come to Jesus with Yick a few episodes ago was really around like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and, you know, hard work, etc. But I still don't think that he's like a law and order like Republican. So that seems weird because Arthur usually seems very kind. And then also, does anyone else think Yick needs to go back and reread his paper about stereotyping? Because this is legitimately what he was just complaining about.
Yes.
These two are clowning big time. It's like
God, once again, we have to deal with a B plot from these two, which is just not necessary. I would rather just have the B plot be that Rick is distributing licorice and no one's suspicious of it. Just let that kid have a nice time.
And so their reasoning is sort of that he's also saying that he just like won the lottery. So they're saying that that's what makes it suspicious. But also, I think that Yick's dad only gave him like $20.
Yeah, dude.
It's like, bro,
Stupid.
All right, moving on past that. So back in the dark room, Susie is asking Caitlin what lesbians even do. And Caitlin gets really defensive, and Susie's like, damn, I was just wondering. They develop a photo of Miss Avery with her hand on Caitlin's shoulder. And Susie says she sure does like to touch people. And
This is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and Caitlin gets even more defensive. And Susie's just like, why do you care? They're not calling you a lesbian, are they?
This is what I'm saying. Like, I really think that the implication here is that, of course, she's gay because she loves to touch people. And that was such a narrative at the time. We shouldn't let teachers be gay in our public school system because they'll convert your children or they're going to abuse your children. And it's really similar to the kind of current discussion that we see going on right now about trans women in public bathrooms and stuff like that. And saying, you can't let trans women in bathrooms because they'll assault people, when obviously what trans women are doing in bathrooms is going to the bathroom. But it's such a gross implication. And I feel like maybe Degrassi didn't necessarily have a responsibility to represent that argument and not have Susie be put in her place. Like, I feel like there was a bit of a responsibility there for it to be like, well, yeah, she's affectionate. That doesn't mean that that's wrong. Or, like, I just feel like some of the lessons in this episode do not hit the mark. And I think that's kind of one of the first moments where there's an opportunity to shut down this argument, and it's not. I do not like this episode.
Yeah,
Right,
I mean, they're trapped in like where I think everyone was at culturally, and so I mean, I'm not making any excuses, but it's just like, I don't know if people were thinking, like, even the people who are trying to be responsible and create television that's supposed to be like morally based, they weren't even on board yet with some of these things.
Or maybe they were, but they thought they were doing the responsible thing by being like, look, this is what some people would say about this.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't really know, because obviously we see many times throughout Degrassi's sort of tenure that they try to show opposing opinions about controversial, and I'm putting that in quotes, topics. But I think that this one just misses it a little bit.
Yeah.
Because they're not showing that opinion is terrible or dangerous. It's a dangerous opinion.
Yeah.
Like, that's the kind of narrative and ideology that gets people hurt or killed.
Or fired?
Yeah.
Right.
Or, barred from doing their job anywhere else.
Right.
Right, and they're saying you shouldn't just assume that people are gay, but they're not going the next step of, and even if they are, it doesn't matter.
Exactly.
They're just stopping at, you shouldn't assume that people are gay.
Yeah.
Also, I realized earlier I should have said that Rick's hair was enviable, not envious.
I'm sorry, okay?
I'm sorry, okay. So back in Caitlin's brain and dreams, she is in Miss Avery's class. Miss Avery calls her over again. They're sort of like doing the same thing, like with the side hug, and then everyone starts whispering and calling Caitlin gay.
Something about the filming of this scene is more creepy than the first dream sequence, I felt like.
Is it all of them turning their pages in unison?
Right, yeah, there's just a lot of like little awkward like feeling moments to this scene, which I again appreciated.
They want you to know it's a dream.
Yeah.
They want you to know that no one's really calling Caitlin a lesbian yet.
Oh.
I do like the way that they portray, like, everyone will start kind of whispering at first, and then it gets louder, and then they're directing it like specifically at her. And this is what I kind of meant too, where they're not necessarily using slurs. They're just saying like, you're gay, you're a lesbian. And that in itself is supposed to be like offensive to her. So outside of school, Miss Avery runs up to Caitlin. She kind of throws her arm around her shoulder. And she says she brought an article for her that she cut out of the newspaper. And she also recommends a book that she ordered for her in the library. And so Kathleen and Annie are still lurking around and like they kind of see all of this. And Caitlin's sort of, I don't know.
Honestly, Kathleen is just using the fact that Caitlin is talking to a teacher as proof
Yes.
now that they are not only gay, but apparently gay together.
Right.
Like, it's a pretty big leap.
And I don't know, I mean, do you think Kathleen is like jealous in some way that like Caitlin's getting this extra attention, or that she's just looking for reasons, you know, to be judgmental?
I mean, I think maybe both, but I also think later in the series we find out about Kathleen's home life. And so my guess is that there's probably also a little bit of her that thinks that if there's drama elsewhere, that she doesn't have to focus on what's happening at home. And I don't know, I don't think that we find out about that until maybe season 2. So I don't even think the writers were thinking that far ahead. I don't think they developed her character in that way. But Kathleen just never has like anything cool going on.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
really
Clearly.
all she's ever doing is talking shit.
It's true. Who was buying drugs with Melanie in that other episode?
Kathleen.
It was Kathleen.
Yeah.
So Kathleen is open. She's open to doing New Zealand zappers and like doing drugs and stuff, but she draws the line at, I don't know, talking to your favorite teacher.
I don't think she really wanted to do drugs. I think it was really just to go along with whatever Melanie wanted to do.
I guess there is an interesting dynamic between Kathleen and Melanie, because Melanie like shuts her down. Melanie is the one that kind of instigates the whole like drug thing. So there is some sort of like, Melanie doesn't seem like a dominant personality, but she does like, she's like, has a little bit more power in the relationship, I think, than Kathleen does.
I think of Kathleen as having the power. Or I think of Kathleen as wanting the power.
Yes.
She wants to overpower Melanie in any situation that she can.
And also, you know, I think whenever kids have ideas like that, like homophobic ideas, like it's got to come from somewhere else. So we can only assume that, you know, Kathleen's parents suck.
Yeah, I mean, I bet Melanie's mom also warned her about lesbians just based on all of her other advice. But Melanie, I think, acts in opposition to her mother.
Right.
And so I think she's probably gotten to the point where she's smart enough to be like, if my mom thinks this, it is probably not true.
Yes. So before class, Kathleen is now spreading rumors about Caitlin, with Annie joining in, and Susie gets really upset and she yells,
What difference does it make anyway, even if she is a lesbian?
She's not a lesbian. She's my friend.
"She's not a lesbian, she's my friend."
Yeah, those things are mutually exclusive.
Oof.
Almost, Susie.
Oh.
Melanie overhears this and she defends Caitlin in a more appropriate way than Susie. And then Kathleen tells her that she wouldn't want to be alone in the dark with Caitlin, and, you know, kind of threatens Susie that they may start talking about her too. And by alone in the dark, I guess she means the dark room, because they've been working together.
Yeah, she said she wouldn't want to be in the dark room with Caitlin because Caitlin might try to do something. Which I'm just kind of like, man, how long have these guys been friends?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's that typical guy who finds out his friend is gay and just assumes he wants to have sex with him.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like no one's going after Susie and Kathleen.
Yeah, get
right
over
now.
yourselves.
Gay people are not predatory to their straight friends.
Exactly. And it's just like now the second time that they're implying that gay people are predators.
So Caitlin comes into class looking honestly sick. She's got this like black and white checkered top with like a white collared shirt under it and a red headband that's like tied around her forehead.
Yes.
Her headband is so dope. I actually wrote in my notes that this week I was not dazzled by any one particular outfit of the week, but that collectively all of Caitlin's headbands form my outfit of the week. So I will be posting
one super outfit.
Yeah, I will be posting several images of the headbands. Because I think there's a red one. I think there might be a pink one.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah.
Very strong.
So Caitlin sits down and she kind of smiles at Susie, and Susie gives her a weird look, and Caitlin looks so sad.
And Kathleen, by the way, also says to Susie, I think before Caitlin comes in, she says, "Don't blame us when people start talking about you too," which is such a gross threat. Yeah, it's just like, and if she's just decided, not only is this teacher gay, so is someone who we're friends with, and now I've decided that we're going to ostracize her and anyone who defends her or socializes with her in any way. I hate it.
It's terrible. After class, Rick is still handing out licorice and telling everyone about the $100 he won. And then Yick and Arthur follow him into the bathroom and watch him pee, and he does not like this.
Who would? We can move on.
Okay. Yeah. The true bathroom predators, Yick and Arthur.
Right?
Yet again, it is just the men.
The men. So over in the dark room again, Susie cannot stop talking. Girl is nervous. And Caitlin's kind of like, you're talking a lot, even for you. And then Susie kind of asks if Caitlin's a lesbian, and Caitlin gets really upset and leaves. Not only does she leave, but she opens the door, which I was like, oh, did that just like ruin all of the photos they're developing?
Yes, probably. I was going to say not look of the week and not necessarily utilitarian prop of the week, but kind of in between is Susie's darkroom apron that just says, "Don't shoot." Like, my guess is someone had to make that. I mean, maybe they bought it, but
I also noticed that. It was pretty good. Pretty good.
So after school, we're back in Caitlin's bedroom, and she's talking to her teddy bear, her only remaining friend, about her dreams.
Well, her teddy bear is not a homophobe, probably.
She's confused about her feelings towards Miss Avery and just doesn't want to be different.
I kind of like her uncertainty here, though. Like, just the fact that it feels like the situation is just a lot of pressure in general. Like, her friends are really creating the situation that she's already having these dreams, I think, independently of how shitty her friends are. But so then her friends like are just sort of like acting this way and making her feel even more uncomfortable. Which I think that works. Like, I think just like she's not necessarily like questioning if she's, I don't know if she's like questioning if she's gay or not. I don't know. Like, she's just sort of like, I can't even process this entire situation right now.
I think Miss Avery is cool. She's beautiful. They share common interests. She's friendly. I think it's totally normal to just like have a girl crush on like a woman, especially like an older woman who you just think is really cool, and maybe you're gonna grow up to be the same kind of like person or the same kind of woman. And so yeah, you know, Caitlin's just kind of like trying to figure out what those feelings mean. They don't have to be sexual, and even her dreams haven't necessarily been sexual. They've been kind of like intimate in that, you know, she's close to Miss Avery, but there hasn't been like a sexual element to them. And she obviously like has feelings for Rick, which is not to say, you know, like maybe she's somewhere on the spectrum of sexuality, or like maybe she just likes boys, like, but she's really just trying to like figure it out and to assume that middle school kids have to have that all figured out is just like, no one necessarily has that all figured out, like, at any point in their life. And yeah, it's just like a lot of pressure to put on her.
Mm-hmm.
In class the next day, Miss Avery is handing back papers and once again touching every shoulder that she sees. When she puts her hand on Caitlin's shoulder, though, she flinches and just kind of reactively says, "Don't touch me." And then so after class, Miss Avery asks her to stay behind and then closes the door, which, like, this is when it's getting a little bit sketchy from Miss Avery. I mean, she's trying to give them privacy to have a conversation, but
yeah, closing the door feels like a pretty big step. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that most teachers kind of have a policy of not closing doors.
Yeah.
Or I've heard of that.
More creepy Joe Biden shit.
Yeah. So Miss Avery sits backwards on the top of a desk to like talk, which is like very classic like teacher energy. I'm surprised she didn't sit backwards on a chair.
It's like Mr. Turner from Boy Meets World.
Yes.
That's how you know he's cool.
Like, let's have a rap session.
We're gonna jam.
So Caitlin tells her that people are saying stuff about her, that she's a lesbian. And then, you know, Miss Avery's like, okay, so like, why are they saying this? And Caitlin lays out all the evidence, which is she's not married. She's always with this woman who we find out is Elaine. And that she says her friends saw them holding hands on King Street and they saw them kiss. And so Miss Avery's basically just like, so everyone who's single is gay, explains that Elaine is her housemate, says they were not holding hands, her friend must have an active imagination, and that she kisses a lot of her friends. So she's just kind of like responding to each of these things specifically.
Yeah, I wrote in my notes that I felt like I'm not super sure what the lesson is or what the moral was coming out of this conversation, because Miss Avery's teachable moment is mostly taken up by defending herself as opposed to being like, I don't know. Sometimes I just feel like there's a lot of missed opportunity for elaboration, like where it's just like, it's okay to be affectionate with your friends. You know, touching your friends doesn't always mean it's sexual. Mm-hmm. Things like that. Like, I just feel like there were things missing from that conversation. And also, it does come up at the end of their conversation when, you know, which we'll get to outside the school, but I feel like there's a time for her to be like, you know, I'm not gay, but what is the problem if I am? You know what I mean? And
right.
I don't know. I guess I just feel like it kind of explains a couple things, but it misses the mark.
It misses. That's exactly what I was gonna say. It's just not quite a fully formed scene.
Yeah, and the result is just Miss Avery is straight. Okay.
And I can't even really go back to my like, oh, maybe just like culturally they weren't there, because you've got Melanie throughout the entire episode saying it doesn't matter if she's gay. So even from a writing standpoint, it is weird that they don't reiterate that and have the adult say that too, because that like further reinforces the actual correct moral of the entire episode, that like it just doesn't have any bearing on this person as a teacher. So yeah, unfortunate.
There was an opportunity for her to say, would I not be the same teacher? Would you not like my class?
Yeah.
You know.
Well, and she does kind of get there later, but I think they're like focusing too much on the rumor aspect at this point, where she's kind of like, you know, if you have a question about something and if you ask someone about it, they might have a different answer. And so she's kind of like, you shouldn't jump to conclusions from rumors because there might be like a reasonable answer that's not, you know, the reason that you're thinking. But so she's just kind of talking about rumors in general rather than this specific one, which is clearly upsetting Caitlin specifically. So yeah, she's definitely missing like, it's not just about a rumor in general, it's about what the specific rumor is. So yeah. Over in the drug stairwell, Rick confronts Arthur and Yick. He actually noticed that these dudes are following him, and he asks them why, and they basically accuse him of like being a thief, and he's like super offended by this, and he's not like, he's sort of like aggressive towards them, but because of their, like, they've been following him and now they're making all these accusations about him, so he's really responding to them. But as they're talking, Radich like sees them and kind of like interrupts their conversation.
And he also says, so you believe everything you hear?
Yeah.
Which I think is, I mean, obviously that's supposed to echo through the whole episode, but
Right.
Yeah. Arthur and Yick deserved worse.
oh, way worse.
Oh, definitely. So back to Miss Avery and Caitlin. Miss Avery basically just tells Caitlin to like chill about her dreams and like says that it's totally normal and it doesn't necessarily like mean anything.
I kind of wrote here that I think Miss Avery is really quick to reassure Caitlin that she's straight and that her dreams mean nothing. And I think that that's really weird because I think that it's okay to say something like, your dreams aren't necessarily sexual, but also, you know, it's okay to have them, and it's okay if you are gay or if you are having those sorts of feelings. You know what I mean? I think that again, there's just a missed opportunity here because they're very quick to just make sure you know that everyone is straight.
It's just like really one-dimensional.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very much like the default is being straight.
Yeah.
Back to Yick and Arthur. Yick is looking through his locker and oh, what do you know? He finds the money. So then Arthur gets really mad at him and they're sort of like in the way that Rick was like kind of grabbed them by their t-shirts, they're like doing to each other. And then they just kind of walk away, leaving his locker completely open.
I gotta say, this entire plot is saved by the broomhead drop, our one broomhead comment of the week. So really, I feel like they dragged us kicking and screaming, but we arrived at the fireworks factory and we get our broomhead of the week thanks to this dumbass plot.
Also, this kid just shoved a loose $20 bill into his locker.
He deserved to lose it.
With like piles of other paper like items.
Also, Arthur says, you almost got me killed. And I just wrote, my dude, it was you accusing a kid of stealing. You almost got yourself killed.
Right, like they just made up that it was Rick. They didn't have any real evidence that anything had happened, obviously because nothing had happened.
Let the kid eat his licorice.
Once a criminal, always a criminal. Am I right?
Oh, God. Joe Biden again in the 94 crime bill.
Hey, Joe Biden is in this episode so many times.
Oh, great. So after school, Mr. Radich is giving Miss Avery a ride home.
In his sick, like, white, is that a DeLorean? Like, what is that car?
No idea. But
we can figure it out.
Radich!
And so Caitlin's kind of like, ooh, Radich is giving you a ride home. And Miss Avery's like, don't start any more rumors.
Yes.
Caitlin apologizes for thinking she's a lesbian. Which that's not exactly what you need to apologize for, but okay.
Of all the things.
Of all the things, yeah. And finally, Miss Avery is like, would it make any difference if I were? Would you think any less of me? And Caitlin would not. Freeze frame on Caitlin.
Caitlin just shakes her head. No, there's not even a response from Caitlin where it's like, no, I guess I would think you were exactly the same as you are now. Or, you know what I mean? Like, I just feel like we needed just a little bit more here.
Yeah.
It's not a strong episode. It's an overall no from me on this one.
I just feel like they could have gone so many other directions with this. I definitely got called gay and a lesbian and a boy and like all kinds of like name calling like that in high school. I feel like, and I guess to me, like, not that there's a distinction between like slurs and other kind of bullying, but I do know that like the sort of goth boys that I was friends with, they had more aggressive, like kind of actual slurs like hurled at them, like gay slurs and stuff. So it is like a major part of like school, and especially like this age at school, but the way that they handled it just totally, like, we get kind of nothing from it.
Yeah, people thought that I was a lesbian in middle school and in high school, which was fine. I never really minded. I was like, yeah, I don't know, maybe.
I also, to me, it was more like I did not like the attention, because people
Yes.
say it in an effort to like embarrass you. So I did not like the attention, but the specific name calling, yeah, it was very like whatever. But
Yeah,
it's
and I
more so
think
if you're artistic, if you're a tomboy, if you have short hair, like it's more these sort of like things that people tend to like name call you for, not necessarily for like being close to a teacher that they think is gay because she's unmarried. Like
Yeah.
they're trying too hard when they could have just easily written a different story to have like the same kind of message.
Just easily written a different episode.
any episode.
Can't relate.
I ultimately identified with Comrade Rick because when I was in middle school, I think if I had won $100, I also would have redistributed my wealth and treated my pals to some candy. But I felt like I identified with Melanie because she was standing up to bigotry, but because she wasn't super aggressive about it like I would have been, I felt like I was more on the side of mostly identifying with Rick in this episode.
Yeah, I had the same feeling about Melanie, and just feeling like I pretty much identified with her. Like that's very much my, like, I'm gonna say something, but kind of to a fault. Like Melanie wasn't necessarily effective in this episode. Like I think she did the best she could, given like she wasn't really involved in this situation. She wasn't like at this sleepover where like a lot of the like kind of episode made like a hard turn, sort of. So she wasn't totally involved in the whole thing. She was just sort of like observing and sort of being like, wait, what the fuck are you all talking about?
So also identify with Melanie for that reason, but I actually think, not specific to this episode, but I'm definitely a Susie when she got so excited about dream analysis, when she got nervous and she like couldn't stop talking, and Caitlin was like, you're talking even more than usual. I could kind of see those parts of Susie that like I identified with, but her just like totally, like she tried to defend her friend in the absolute wrong way, which I do not identify with like at all. But yeah, some of her other like personality traits, I guess, I identified with. And friends. What did we learn from this episode?
Well, basically going back to how I felt like I identified with Melanie, I learned that it can be difficult having to be the one to speak up for what's right. But if you just put your voice out there, sometimes that's the best you can do.
I learned that 1987 was simply not ready for lesbians. Melanie is the only person in this episode who's standing up to homophobia, and she's not just dismissing the rumor and saying that it can't be true, but she's saying even if it is true, what's wrong with being gay? It's also cool to be close and show affection to people of the same gender or opposite gender or anybody without it being sexual.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, we really didn't learn too much from this episode because the message is not very good. But I think what they were trying to get across is that when you hear a rumor about someone, it's better to just ask them about it directly, or to like let it go rather than perpetuating it or letting it change the way that you feel about them. I think it's also okay to have a girl crush on cool women in your life. It doesn't have to mean that you're sexually attracted to them, although it's totally cool if you are. There's like I said, there's nothing explicitly sexual about Caitlin's dreams, but just the thought of being like physically and emotionally close to a woman like made her uncomfortable. but she may have just been drawn to Miss Avery because she's like a warm person who shares her interests and has cool, hot friends. So that's it for Rumor Has It. Kind of a rough one to get through. Next week we'll be watching The Best Laid Plans.